Have you ever wondered how Canada came to be the country we know today? Our journey begins thousands of years ago with the indigenous peoples who were the original inhabitants of this vast land. These diverse groups, from the Iroquois in the east to the Haida in the west, lived in harmony with the natural world, developing rich cultures and complex societies long before the arrival of Europeans. Around the year 1000, a new chapter in Canada's history was written with the arrival of the Vikings. Led by Leif Erikson, these Norse seafarers established a short-lived settlement in what is now Newfoundland, marking the first known European presence in North America. Their stay was brief, but the Vikings' arrival set the stage for the waves of European explorers and settlers who would follow centuries later. In the late 15th century, European interest in the New World began to intensify. John Cabot, an Italian explorer sailing under the English flag, claimed the land we now know as Canada for England in 1497. This marked the beginning of a period of intense competition among European powers for control of the vast riches of the Americas. France soon entered the fray, with Jacques Cartier planting a cross on the Gaspe Peninsula in 1534, claiming the land for King Francis I. The French and English, along with other European powers, vied for control of the region, their rivalries shaping the development of Canada in profound ways. The impact of these arrivals on the indigenous peoples was profound and often devastating. Diseases brought by the Europeans decimated indigenous populations, and the newcomers' hunger for land and resources led to displacement and conflict. Yet, despite these hardships, the indigenous peoples have endured, their cultures and contributions forming an integral part of Canada's identity. So that was the early inception of Canada, but the true formation was yet to come. From a land of diverse cultures, Canada began to take shape under European influence. In the early 17th century, a new chapter unfolded in the history of Canada with the establishment of New France. This was a time of exploration and settlement, as French explorers, traders and settlers ventured into the vast territories, establishing permanent settlements like Quebec City in 1608. New France developed over the years under the French crown. The French introduced their language, culture and legal systems, shaping the socio-cultural landscape of the region. They also forged alliances with the indigenous peoples, forming a unique blend of cultures. However, the balance of power shifted dramatically in the mid-18th century. The 7 Years' War, a global conflict involving major European powers, had profound implications for New France. In 1763, as part of the Treaty of Paris, France ceded most of its North American territories to Britain. This marked the beginning of British rule in Canada. The British conquest brought significant changes to the political structure and culture of the region. The French civil law system was replaced with the English common law, although some French legal customs were retained. The British also imposed their language and culture, but the French-speaking population retained their language and culture, creating a unique bilingual and bicultural society. British rule also brought about economic changes. The fur trade, a significant part of the economy under French rule, continued to thrive. However, the British encouraged agriculture and other economic activities, diversifying the economy. The British also reorganized the political structure. They divided the territory into provinces, each governed by a British-appointed governor. This laid the groundwork for the later political organization of Canada. In the face of these changes, the French-speaking population, known as the Canadians, developed a strong sense of identity and nationalism. This British rule set the stage for the birth of a nation. It marked the beginning of a long journey towards independence and the formation of the Canada we know today. The seeds of a unified Canada were sown in the mid-19th century. At this time, British North America was a patchwork of colonies, each with its own government, its own interests and its own identity. But the idea of a greater unified Canada began to take root. This idea came to fruition in 1867 with the Confederation. It was a monumental moment. The British North America Act made Canada a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. The Act brought together 4 provinces: Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Each retained its own government for local affairs but shared a federal government for national matters. Canada was born, but it was not yet the Canada we know today. The country began to grow, both in size and ambition. Over the next 34 years, 6 more provinces and territories would join the Confederation. Some, like Manitoba and British Columbia, joined willingly, enticed by the promise of a transcontinental railroad. Others, like Prince Edward Island, joined out of economic necessity. And then there was the Canadian Pacific Railway. This was an undertaking of epic proportions, spanning the vast expanses of the Canadian wilderness. It was a Herculean task, fraught with challenges. Workers battled harsh weather, rugged terrain, and even political opposition. But in 1885, a final spike was driven into the ground at Craigellachie, British Columbia, marking the completion of the railway. The impossible had been made possible. The railway was more than just a means of transportation. It was a symbol of unity, a physical link connecting east to west. It brought together diverse provinces and territories, facilitating trade, communication, and movement. It was a tangible manifestation of the dream of a unified Canada. With the railroad connecting east to west, Canada truly became a unified nation. The 20th century brought significant changes to Canada, shaping the country we see today. As the clock struck midnight, ushering in the 20th century, Canada was already a nation of promise, but it was about to face some of its most transformative years. Among the first major events were the World Wars. Canada's role in these conflicts was significant and far-reaching. In the First World War, Canada, as part of the British Empire, sent over 600,000 men to fight, a vast number for a country with a population of just 8 million. The Second World War saw Canada again standing shoulder to shoulder with its allies, contributing resources, manpower, and strategic support. These conflicts, while destructive and tragic, galvanized Canada's national identity. The aftermath of these wars saw Canadians demanding more autonomy from British rule, leading the progression to full independence. The Statute of Westminster in 1931 was a crucial stepping stone, granting Canada legislative independence. But it wasn't until the final ties were severed with the patriation of the Constitution in 1982 that Canada truly stood on its own. In between these significant milestones, Canada saw other important developments that shaped its modern identity. The year 1965 marked the adoption of the now iconic maple leaf flag, replacing the former red ensign. This new flag, with its simple yet striking design, was a clear symbol of Canada's growing sense of self and independence. The later part of the 20th century also saw Canada taking on a more prominent role on the world stage. It became known for its diplomacy and peacekeeping efforts, a reputation that continues to this day. The 20th century was a period of significant growth and transformation for Canada. From the battlefields of Europe to the peaceful negotiations of international treaties, Canada emerged as a nation with a clear identity and a strong sense of purpose. And so the Canada we know today took shape, but history never stops. From its roots as home to Indigenous peoples, to a nation shaped by European influence, Canada has a rich and diverse history. This vast land, now known as Canada, was once solely inhabited by Indigenous peoples with their diverse cultures and societies. They lived harmoniously with the land, their stories and traditions woven into every corner of the landscape. But as we've seen, the arrival of Europeans in the late 15th century marked the beginning of a new chapter in Canada's history. The establishment of New France by French explorers introduced European customs and traditions to the region. This era also saw the fur trade flourish, shaping the economic landscape of the country. However, the British conquest in the mid-18th century brought its own influences, and with it, the reign of British rule. This period was marked by significant changes, including the introduction of British laws and governance. The Confederation in the late 19th century was a pivotal moment in Canada's history, setting the stage for the country's growth and expansion. It was during this time that Canada began to take shape as we know it today, with the addition of provinces and territories. The Canadian Pacific Railway was a symbol of this expansion, connecting the vast country from coast to coast. As we moved into the 20th century and beyond, Canada continued to evolve. The country played significant roles in both world wars, and the post-war era saw a tremendous growth in population, economy, and global standing. Canada's multicultural policy, its commitment to peacekeeping, and its advancements in technology and healthcare are just a few of the defining features of modern Canada. In this journey through time, we've seen how Canada's history is a tapestry of diverse cultures, significant events, and influential figures. This history has shaped Canada into a nation known for its inclusivity, resilience, and continuous growth. So, next time you think of Canada, remember the journey it took to become the country we know and love today.